For Naruto, it was difficult to imagine her first mission as squad leader going any worse. At first she had to lie to her team about what they were doing. Then she betrayed Kiba by sending him on a dangerous mission she knew he couldn't complete. And yes, she realized it was a betrayal the second after she did it. It had seemed like such a good idea just moments before. Send the one they needed the least to keep up the appearance of cooperation, but order Kiba to prioritize his own life over the retrieval of a corpse. It just made sense at the time. Funny how that worked. With her new sage powers, she could almost rival the Nighteyes. What mortal could stand against her? The flaw in that kind of thinking was that even after mastering it, accessing Sage Mode was a lot harder than just flashing a few hand signs. You had to set it up beforehand. Meaning you had to know when and where you're going to get into combat and have the time to prepare. That or have external help like from the Elder Toads, but the Cube had neatly sabotaged that. And then Lady Chiyo abandoned them, but Naruto had difficulty calling that a betrayal. Even after everything that happened on this mission, Naruto's moral compass was strong enough to realize she betrayed them first. It made it hard to blame Chiyo. And now, Naruto realized how clever the Akatsuki had been. When she had seen Deidara leave with Gaara, she had assumed it was the result of internal disagreements within the Akatsuki. Now she strongly suspected it had been done deliberately to reveal the cracks in her team. Now, she and Sakura stood alone against Sasori. Once again, Sakura would have to face mortal danger because Naruto screwed everything up. Even after years of training, becoming one of if not the strongest ninja in Konoha, nothing seems to have changed. Her father, Asuma, Kakashi, Jiraiya, even Danzo. Why all these people seemed to have such high hopes for her was truly a mystery. All Naruto hoped for at that moment was that Sakura wasn't going to be paying the ultimate price for her mistakes. To that end, Naruto took point. With Sage Mode taken out of the equation, Sakura was actually a bit better at reacting to the third Kazekage's regular weapons. But Naruto had just been given the antidote. That meant that for about 3 minutes, she had immunity. A barrage of wooden arms was sent towards her, and Naruto countered it by setting her hair to intercept, letting it wrap around the attack and cut through the wooden constructs. Time for one of her new tricks. If you think I'm helpless without Senjutsu, you're sorely mistaken, Naruto said as she made hand signs, enough for 2 jutsus in sequence. Next she threw a bunch of shuriken which immediately started to duplicate. Shadow Shuriken Jutsu! And that wasn't all. Wind style cutting winds! Her wind style had always been destructive, but it sometimes lacked enough true finishing power. A sturdy enough opponent could tank it, like Kimimaro had done years back. Adding a barrage of sharp metal to it seemed like an efficient way to mitigate that problem. Sasori smiled and moved his fingers, commanding the third Kazekage. It opened its mouth, revealing some intricate ceiling array. And suddenly all her Shadow Shuriken stopped mid-flight, hanging still in the air. Another movement from Sasori's fingers sent all the Shuriken flying back in her direction, thanks to the third Kazekage's magnet release. They were launched back at her with such force they were hardly slowed down by Naruto's own Winjutsu. Naruto's own Shuriken barrage was too wide to dodge, just like her Winjutsus usually were. So she was left to make a hasty improvised parry with her hair. She couldn't parry them all, and Naruto received several cuts. Some kind of telekinesis? Naruto thought. Remember, Lady Chiyo isn't here to give a whole dissertation on everything Sasori can and tries to do. Naruto has studied what she could on the known members of the Akatsuki, but she knows jack all about the third Kazekage and his magnet release. You've got some strong jutsus, girl, but I think I'll be able to put them to even better use once I add you to my collection. Considering that Sasori had previously went into some detail about how he made his human puppets, that comment sent a shiver down Naruto's spine. He's just trying to upset me. If you like that, then you'll love this! Naruto again made some hand signs. Summoning Jutsu! And for the second time that day, she summoned Gamekichi. The cave was barely large enough to hold him. Let's turn this guy into cinders, my friend. You got it. And together they shouted, Combination Jutsu! Toad Flame Bullets! and the whole cave was briefly turned into an oven. Sasori's eyes widened and he hastily collected the Kazekage puppet to his side. Iron Sand! And both puppets were shielded from the flame behind a curtain of iron. It was still searing hot behind the defense, and if either Sasori or the puppet were made of organic flesh, that might have been a problem. But they weren't, so it wasn't.
Impressive indeed. If that's the kind of power she can bring to bear even without her ultimate form, I truly won't be able to do anything but flee if I let her gain access to it. Truly some spectacular jutsus, though I sadly won't be able to copy that one by only converting your body, Sasori said as he lifted the iron sand out of the way. Still, in this battle it's clear you've got the power advantage, even now. Despite Sasori's cautious statement, his expression didn't show any worry. This wouldn't be the first time he had fought someone above his weight class in the ninjutsu department. He had defeated the third Kazekage after all, and that was obviously before he gained access to him as his strongest puppet. Sasori knew how to think his way around a more powerful opponent. Sasori, with all his tools, was strong. But a puppet master's strongest weapon wasn't the massive and flashy amount of weaponry and jutsu. It was always the traps you didn't see coming. Another one of the Hiroku's weapons that had been thrown to the side, specifically its large tail, was sent towards Gamekichi. Gamekichi's size made him strong, but it also meant he wasn't exactly best at dodging attacks, and was easily hit by it. Ah! Damn! What's this? Poison! Naruto yelled in fear and horror. Another one she cared about put in danger because of her. You're huge! A normal dose shouldn't work on you, right? She pleaded more than asked. Yeah, I should be fine. But I won't be able to help you anymore. I promised I would. Then we'll work hard so that the next time we see them, we tear them to fucking pieces and feed them to the worms. That's alright, just please be safe. Gamekichi grinned, happy that she worried about him so. You too. And then he disappeared in a puff of smoke, having been sent back to Mount Miyabuku. How many more of those can you summon? What massive amount of chakra would that take? That was a good question. Today she had already summoned Gamekichi twice in the Elder Toads. Even for Naruto, that wasn't an insignificant amount of chakra, though she still hadn't reached her halfway point. Did you know that the amount of weapons I can include in a human puppet is actually dependent on their original chakra capacity? My dear girl, you will truly be beautiful. Naruto, I can help! Sakura shouted. I'm immune to the poison, you're not! Naruto said, though she knew that wouldn't last. Since time wasn't on her side, she charged forward, attempting a more conventional strategy. And it was almost like she was fighting Gaara again, with how Sasori used the iron sand to keep her at bay. Thankfully, Gaara was one of those people that Naruto had spent many hours thinking about strategies of how to defeat. Some of those could easily be used here. The moment when Naruto managed to maneuver herself so the iron sand and its terrain briefly blocked her from sight from both the Kazekage puppets and Sasori, she sent tendrils of her hair beneath the ground. She wasn't a Doton user, but her mastery over wind was such that she could sever the ground in her way. She sent her hair all the way across the cave to burst out right beneath Sasori. Before he could jump away, his legs were trapped, and if she had been fighting Gaara, that would have been the end of it. But then Sasori's body from the waist up detached itself from the entangled lower part of its body. Half of Sasori was sent flying, and before he hit the ground, he had pulled a new pair of legs from some scrolls and attached them. What does it take to kill this thing? Naruto thought as she scurried to escape from the iron sand. Her attack had briefly caused her momentum to halt, which had resulted in her taking a couple of injuries. Thankfully the antidote was still in effect, but she had seconds left. Not enough for another big play. Not that Naruto had a clue on how to defeat Sasori beyond eradicating every piece of him. He could seemingly rebuild himself from the ground up, and had several spare parts ready to replace any lost limbs. He seemed more machine than man. And
Now, she'd be fighting without the antidote. Any small hit and she was finished. And Sasori had already proven to be quite crafty. What was she to do here? Damn it! Naruto cursed, rushing to Sakura's side. Naruto was grateful she had stayed out of the conflict thus far. Without explanation, she grabbed Sakura and blasted herself out of the cave with her Winjutsu, and then they were soaring over the landscape. Even after everything, I'm still reduced to fleeing from an opponent I can't defeat. Naruto gave voice to her frustration. Oh, it wasn't like she thought her chances of victory were 0 if she stayed. But well, she was at a clear disadvantage, and if she fell, Sakura would be next. It seems I really can't win without Sage Mode. Hopefully she'd be able to run far enough that it gave her time to access the form. Naruto, I don't think fleeing is in the cards right now, Sakura said, pointing. Sasori was chasing them on a cloud of iron sand. Hey, if Gaara can fly using his sand, then there is no reason Sasori can't do something similar. Listen, I get why you didn't let me help before, but now you're as vulnerable to the poison as me. Sakura gave her a smile that Naruto knew was meant to reassure her. We'll make it through this, like always. I don't know his weaknesses, if he even has any. I think I might. I haven't been idle while you were fighting. I think I figured out some of his tricks, Sakura said. Naruto felt some of her worry ebb away. She had a lot more faith currently in Sakura's ability to think of a plan than herself. Her self-confidence was shot at the moment. Sasori was gaining on them, but they could still choose where they landed, so they chose a deep forest, the place where all Leaf Ninja felt most at home. Earlier, Kiba had to run as fast as possible to catch up to Temari before she took to the sky. As he really didn't have a good way to follow, let alone attack an airborne opponent, he really hoped she could take an extra passenger. You can get on, but the dog as well would be too heavy, Temari said. Kiba wanted to argue, but every second he wasted doing that allowed Deidara to get further away. Deidara, in canon, was baiting Naruto, deliberately flying close enough to keep taunting him, tempting him into making a mistake. Deidara here doesn't really care about his pursuers beyond distracting them enough to give Sasori some reprieve. In short, he's flying away a lot faster. Kiba climbed on onto Temari's fan on all fours, and he took to the sky. Akamaru stayed behind for now. Instantly, Kiba decided that flying wasn't for him. His face was noticeably pale as he looked at the ground below. Please tell me you're not afraid of heights, Temari pleaded. She already wasn't expecting much from him, but that would be a bit too pathetic. I'm not afraid of anything, woman, Kiba said, and Temari just sighed. At least his heart seemed to be in the right place, as he'd saved her from a fire jutsu before. Maybe he'd at least shield her from one of Deidara's explosions with his body. He seemed like the macho type that would jump at the chance to save a damsel, and Temari had no qualms about taking advantage of that. Catching up to him isn't a problem, Temari said. I managed to do that before. It's just that I don't have a counter to his explosions, and I was forced to retreat. Her Winjutsus could potentially blow the explosions away, but she needed her fan to do that, and she was currently using it for transportation. Do you have any long-range jutsus that can help us here? I could throw some standard explosive attacks and kunai, but that's about it. I'm more of a close-range fighter myself. Useless, Temari thought and grimaced. She'd just have to do her best to dodge then. Honestly, after your brother sacrificed himself to keep you safe, throwing your life away seems like a poor way to repay him. Deidara shouted at them when they came close. From his hands came several clay birds which honed in on them. Temari tried her best to dodge, but she wasn't any more capable of that now than last time. She threw a kunai at one of the clay birds and it exploded, sending her fan briefly spiraling from the shockwave before she managed to restabilize. If she tried to trigger the explosions from far away, then the clay figures could dodge. To hit them, they needed to be closer, but then the resulting explosion would still hinder them. Hold on, I want to try something, Kiba said, shakily climbing to his feet. It was difficult since the flying fan was hardly the most stable of platforms. He held out a kunai in front of him and it started to lightly sparkle with electricity. He threw the kunai and the clay bird it hit, notably, didn't explode. Aha! So it's an earth-based jutsu, Kiba said, glad he could do something to help. He hadn't been at all sure it was earth. It could have easily been fire, or pure lightning, or just not an elemental jutsu at all. But it didn't hurt to try. Lightning attacks could, apparently, dismantle the explosions. And yes, I'm well aware that Deidara's technique is actually a Kikigenkai that's a combination of earth and lightning, called explosion release. But earth is a logical conclusion that Kiba comes to. You're a lightning user? Tamari asked. Not exactly. My main element is earth. I only very recently got started on lightning. As Kiba had been training with Kakashi, I think having him at least starting to learn the very basics of lightning release, a second element for him, is believable. Infusing a kunai with it is about all I can do right now. So he doesn't have more than Genin level mastery over a technique he wants to pit against an S-class ninja's specialty, Tamari thinks. It will have to do, she said, and allowed Kiba to handle the explosions while she just focused on chasing their target. Let me just say that if Deidara was launching the same level of explosives at Tamari and Kiba as he did in his canonical battle with Sasuke, they'd be very dead. Kiba is very new to lightning release and can only charge up a single kunai at a time, which makes him a lot slower than Deidara is with his C1. Thankfully, Deidara doesn't have as much explosives with him right now as he did in his battle with Sasuke. Also, he has recently used a lot of it in his fight against Gaara. Deidara also doesn't really consider them a real threat, and is mostly just playing around. So with that, and Tamari trying her damnedest to dodge and weave through the explosions, and with Kiba strategically dismantling bombs they couldn't dodge, they slowly got closer. Of course, it got harder the closer they got. Actually reaching Deidara without being blown to bits was proven to be problematic. Deidara was in fact so not threatened by them, he was gladly indulging himself by talking about his art. Man, this guy is annoying, Kiba said. Can you get us higher? I might have something, and having gravity on my side will help. Not having any better ideas, Tamari did as he asked. Kiba bit his lips to draw a bit of blood and took out a large scroll. Summoning Jutsu! Rain of Claws! And a large pack of dogs were launched out of the scroll like missiles. All of them were rotating using the Inuzuka's characteristic Fang over Fang attack. Because, of course, Kakashi would give Kiba the dog summoning contract. Deidara next showed that he was a lot faster than he previously led on by dodging and weaving through the attacks. I'll remind you that Deidara, when he was really trying, could dodge attacks from Sasuke, who could blitz cannon Naruto, Sakura Sai and Tenzo/Yamato. A Jonin. The dogs, in this case, act more like Tamari's summons, where they are used for an attack and then disappear. So no, they are not all falling to their deaths. You're going to have to do a lot better than that, Deidara taunted, preparing some explosives to start countering the rain of attacking dogs instead of merely dodging. Then how about this? Deidara heard from right behind him as someone grabbed his shoulder. He turned and saw Kiba grinning at him. One of the summoned dogs that had sailed past Deidara had been Akamaru, and then Akamaru had actually used the summoning jutsu himself to summon Kiba, who had then launched himself at Deidara's back using Akamaru as a jumping platform in disguise. It was a trick that was only possible because Kiba was so in sync with his dogs that for all intents and purposes, he was a part of the dog pack, and so he could be summoned as if he was one. Deidara was next tackled out of the air, sending both him and Kiba falling to the ground. Let go of me, you mutt! No way. From this range, if you try to use your explosions on me, we'll both die. So let's see how much you truly value your so-called art. You're insane! Are you trying to get us both killed? But simply, yeah. I know I'm not that special, so my life to kill a bastard like you sounds like a fine trade to me. Kiba pulled up a few explosive tags. But if you're not gonna, then allow me. And he showed Deidara the biggest shit-eating grin. Art is... Deidara's eyes widened. Don't you fucking dare! An explosion! Kiba finished. Sasori also knew that the Leaf Ninja were looking for a sort of terrain advantage, and wasn't inclined to play along by blindly rushing in. They had already managed to hide among the trees, but he didn't intend to look for them conventionally. He had a general idea of their location. That was enough. He bathed a small part of the forest in poison gas. As expected, the Jinchuriki countered with her Winjutsu. But now all Sasori had to do was follow that jutsu to its epicenter to find his target. He did find Naruto there, but he didn't forget that there was still a second enemy who had to be hiding somewhere. Naruto, again, tried her great breakthrough, combined with the Shadow Shuriken Jutsu. Except this time aimed at Sasori instead of the Kazekage puppet. Going after the puppet master. A basic tactic, Sasori thought. He suspected that there was more to this attack though, as the Jinchuriki had already seen this attack fail before. Still, he let his puppet's magnum release stop the metal projectiles. One of the kunai didn't stop though, and kept flying towards him, seeming only a little hindered. The iron stand would be too late to come to his defense. That left dodging or parrying, something he was easily capable of. But still, he prepared to inject his organic core into a new body, in case there was more to this. He summoned several lesser puppets to intercept the kunai, but when it came within range, it transformed into the second kunoichi, who immediately smashed through the puppet and continued on towards his current body. Sasori smiled and decided to take a page out of Deidara's book, exploding his puppet body in a blast of searing hot poison gas. Sasori's core briefly made its home into one of the lesser puppets, which had been out of the way, and had been given possession of all of his important scrolls, which housed his collection. He immediately summoned another copy of his default body and attached himself to it. The body hopping took a good chunk of his concentration and control, so he wasn't able to capitalize on the Leaf Ninja's moment of distraction due to the poison gas. Naruto then immediately blew the gas from Sakura, who had reacted fast enough to hold her breath, so was still fine besides some first-degree burns. You two have already cost me 2 bodies. These aren't easy to make, you know. Sasori commented as he idly sent Iron Sand back to chase after Naruto and now also Sakura. Keeping the Jinchuriki moving and so deny Sage mode was still his main strategy. And so the chase continued. Naruto and Sakura tried to hide behind trees, but Sasori simply cut down the terrain and all they seemed capable of doing was dodging. Still, Sasori got a sneaking suspicion that something was wrong. He was familiar with the feeling of desperation and hopelessness that his opponents sometimes felt when fighting him. As things stood now, reading the flow of battle, Sakura and Naruto would eventually make a mistake. They were only defending and evading, and therefore they were losing. They should know that too, yet he didn't get that impression from their postures. Am I fighting clones perhaps? Is the real Jinchuriki charging up her superior form even now? As every hit was supposed to end the fight due to the poison, both kunoichis had managed to avoid being hit so far. But that also meant that they might be shadow clones in disguise. The only way to tell would be to damage them. While he didn't yet know how, Sasori's decades of experience told him he'd been had somehow, and he needed to realize their plan and quickly. When he found out what was wrong, it took him another second to accept it. Genjutsu? Sasori considers himself all but immune to Genjutsu thanks to the nature of what he was now. He didn't pause to say to ask questions though. When he saw the image of the 2 kunoichis falter and fade after disrupting his own chakra, he immediately used his Iron Sand to fly away and flee. Staying around and praying he'd find the Jinchuriki before she re-entered her superior form was too risky. Pain had made it clear he was supposed to prioritize staying alive and gathering intel over victory here. Though it annoyed him to no end that he might never find out how someone had managed to slap a genjutsu on him. Sometime earlier. He's more machine than man. He might not even have a real brain. How and why do you think this will work? He's got chakra. That must mean he's still alive in some fashion, and I think I might be able to find that part of him. His chakra strings. That's the key. They have to lead to that part of him. Chakra was a mix of spiritual and physical energy. No mere machine could make it, or so Sakura theorized. It should be noted that Sakura isn't fully correct here. The third Kazekage puppet does still have lingering remnants of the chakra he had while alive. But Sakura is right enough for her plan to work. You can see the chakra strings? Yes. It said you needed Jujutsu to see chakra, but your Rasengan proves that isn't true. If an ordinary person can see chakra if it's condensed, then a Jujutsu shouldn't be the only way to see all forms of chakra if one can enhance their eyes enough. I've been shunting chakra to my eyes and reinforcing the part of my brain that deals with optic information. It's faint, but I saw an outline of the chakra strings connected to his puppet body while you were fighting. And so the trend of Sakura unlocking more of the Sharingan's abilities without even having a Sharingan continues. The plan was still a bit of a long shot. Sakura, while she smashed through one of the puppets, had been able to send her genjutsu images to follow the chakra strings to their source. The images had actually been some of the kunai that had been stopped by the magnet release. A weapon that had already been stopped tended to lose the enemy's attention, and so it was here. The kunais had then transformed into leaves blowing on the wind. Then, they got lucky when the genjutsu actually affected Sasori, as they weren't sure it would, as he didn't have a conventional brain. However, his organic core still resembled his brain, his essence, enough that it counted. As Sasori had fought himself all but immune to genjutsu, it had taken him a while to notice. The main reason for Sasori's self-presumed immunity was that all the high-tier genjutsu that he was familiar with all relied on either sound or eye contact, both of which he was actually immune to. And if he had stuck around for even a few seconds longer, he likely would have been felled by Sage Naruto. The Kunoichis could have tried to attack sooner, but they had wanted to play it safe. If Sasori broke out of the genjutsu too fast while they were attacking in base, they'd risk being poisoned with no hope of rescue. As it was, Naruto could only watch in frustration as the Rasen Shuriken she launched at Sasori's retreating form in the sky failed to kill him due to the long distance. She fell to her knees and punched the ground. Damn it! With Sage-enhanced strength, her punch caused a localized earthquake, and Sakura briefly struggled to hold her balance. I thought I'd be good enough by now. You're plenty strong, Sakura objected with a frown. Naruto was her friend and she'd support her no matter what. But Sakura found it hard to feel sympathy here, with Naruto packing so much more firepower than she did. And she also wasn't a fan of Naruto's recent decisions concerning Kiba. All I did here was buy you a bit of time to allow you to use a jutsu that you had no way to predict you wouldn't be able to use just like that. What was up with that anyway? And Naruto told her of the QB sabotage. Why you continue to put up with that monster is beyond me. I get you feel bad for it, this thing that killed your parents, but it clearly holds nothing but contempt for you, and it's threatening to get us both killed. You've got your scruples, I've got mine, Naruto said, and then focused inwards. But I swear, if you put Sakura in danger again, I will have the Hokage slap a genjutsu on you, I swear it.
If you don't want your precious Sakura to be put in danger, don't drag her into these dangerous situations,
the QB retorted. Naruto wasn't in the mood, nor did she have the time to argue. As for my supposed strength, Naruto returned to her conversation with Sakura. Yes, I'm strong. I've got the techniques and abilities necessary to win. The fact that I don't means I've got nothing but my own stupidity to blame. Giving a genin the techniques and body of a Kage doesn't make them as strong as one. That's what I am right now. Naruto sighed. Let's go after Kiba. I can feel sorry for myself after this mission is done. Naruto motioned for Sakura to climb onto her back. Sakura found it somewhat humiliating, but it'd indeed be faster if Naruto carried her. Deidara knew more about explosives than anyone else alive, and was able to use his extensive knowledge of explosive attacks to dismantle enough of them that it didn't kill them outright, saving both himself and Kiba. It still injured both of them, and they were still falling at terminal velocity, and needed some way to survive the fall. Deidara coats his entire body in clay to cushion his fall. More so than an injury to his body was the injury to his pride. He had just stopped a massive explosion from happening. To Deidara, this was practically sacrilegious. Kiba, plainly, didn't have a plan past this point. But Tamari races downward to catch him just in time. She would have caught him sooner, but her first priority after Deidara got tackled had been to grab Gaara. Tamari couldn't carry 3 people while flying though, so they had to land here. Even bruised, singed and battered, Kiba still couldn't resist bragging, especially to a pretty woman. Pretty cool, eh? It was, but Tamari currently had no capacity to appreciate it. Gaara had no pulse. She had half expected it, to be honest, but still. You disrespectful brat! Deidara raged. Now you've... Tamari was in no mood to listen. All that she was thinking about right now was revenge. Die! And she blasted Deidara with her giant wind scythe jutsu. While the attack was wide, Deidara was fast enough to jump back and take cover behind some rocks. He clicked his tongue in annoyance and created some C1 explosives as little worms to tunnel beneath the ground and sneak their way up to Tamari. Now, Kiba is trained with Kakashi and has himself become a fan of the Headhunter Jutsu, so he is very familiar with sneak attacks coming from beneath the earth. His shouted warning allowed Tamari to jump away, dragging the injured Kiba and Gaara's corpse with her. At this point, Kiba notices Gaara's state as well. We failed, he said and looked to Tamari. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. I should have rescued him before, or prevented him from being captured. Kiba couldn't think of some eloquent statement to make her feel better. So what now? Now we kill this bastard. If we can, sure, but I don't feel like dying for nothing. Then leave if you please. I don't need you. Kiba sighed. Look, I don't know how you feel. I never lost someone I was particularly close to. But I've seen what a lust for revenge can do to a person, he said, sparing a thought for Sasuke, but he was mostly thinking of Naruto. He figured that her recent odd behavior was still partly due to that old grudge. Seriously, I think this guy might be out of our league. You're damn right! Deidara shouted and sent some more explosives their way. Not a large bombardment, just C1 birds. Tamari again used her fan to blow it all away. Deidara at this point decides to go the attrition route. His C1 explosives didn't take a whole lot of chakra to make, so he used them to force Tamari to keep using her large wind style attacks to keep them at bay. Wind jutsus that took noticeably more chakra than Deidara was expanding. Tamari's chakra reserves weren't small or anything. She was a Jonin and one of Suna's finest. But she still had less than Deidara. Soon she was puffing for breath. She wanted to counterattack, but Deidara had hidden himself well. His remote-controlled attacks gave him the luxury of attacking while hidden. Tamari had tried a wide, terrain-destroying blast, but it hadn't flushed him out. Deidara was, in fact, hidden beneath the earth. Kiba would have been able to track him by scent, but Tamari's continuous use of wind jutsus were actually messing with that ability. Deidara knew that at this point, he could just leave. This fight was ultimately meaningless. Sasori had gotten the important job of dealing with the Leaf Jinchuriki. Deidara had done his best to split up the enemy's forces and expose cracks in their goals by leaving with Gaara, but nothing he did here now would influence Sasori's match. So Deidara knew he could just leave. But damn it, he just really wanted to kill these two, especially the dog boy. Eventually, Tamari had to ration her chakra and stop using wide area of attack wind jutsus. She knew that in this situation, the best thing to do was to take to the sky and just flee as fast as possible. But she just couldn't. It wasn't just her unwillingness to let Deidara escape. It was that, even though his body was growing cold, she couldn't bring herself to leave Gaara behind. And she was too honorable to leave Kiba behind and just flee with Gaara, especially after the Leaf Ninja had went above and beyond for them. Sensing that Temari was running low on gas, Deidara revealed himself again and started to increase the pressure. Temari used what energy she had left to attack Deidara with all that she had left, but it was a simple earth clone. Bait to make Temari expend more of her dwindling reserves of chakra. Kiba tried to stand up. That kamikaze explosion had done a number on him, but he could still walk and run, if not as fast. Listen, it's me he's pissed off at, Kiba said. If we run in different directions, he'll no doubt go after me, letting you escape. No reason for both of us to bite the dust. I'm not letting some damn leaf ninja show me up, Temari said. Give me a real plan, or else shut your trap and let me think. Too late, Deidara yelled. The real one this time. He wanted to see his great art's final moments in action. The attack came from above them. Deidara's C2 dragon that he had been using as a mount earlier. Kiba's attack hadn't dispersed it. Deidara had kept it hidden until Temari had been too exhausted to blow it away. Disappear! Kiba closed his eyes. The earth shook all around him, but he couldn't help but note that he wasn't dead. When he opened his eyes, he saw 4 white puppets surrounding him, Temari and Gaara. They had made some kind of chakra shielding around them. You young people are always so loud, Lady Chiyo complained as she walked into view. She was using one hand to control the puppets that had saved Kiba and Temari. The other hand she had used to throw a weapon at Deidara, using the distraction of the huge explosion. It was the same weird sealing jutsu that had been used on Sasori near his canonical fight. Sealing technique Lion's Closing Roar. And under the cover of the explosion, the sneak attack had worked. Deidara was pinned to the ground, a sealing formula surrounding him. Temari didn't waste time and jumped at the now helpless Deidara. The last thing Deidara saw was the blunt part of Temari's fan coming down on him. He yelled and tried to blow himself up with C0, but his chakra was completely sealed. Temari's closed fan came down and squashed Deidara's head like a melon. And so the Akatsuki took its first casualty. I got here a while ago, Lady Chiyo said. But I didn't want to reveal myself until the most optimal moment. Where are Naruto and Sakura? Kiba asked. They were fine the last time I saw them, Lady Chiyo said. It was technically true. Kiba was cut off as one of Lady Chiyo's puppets turned around and stabbed him. In a non-vital area, but still. The blade was also laced with a paralytic poison that would prevent him from moving for a while. Temari's eyes went wide. What are you doing? Taking care of our enemies, child. You know as well as I what the state of the world is. If we let this boy go, you'll just have to fight him later. He helped us. Then he's betraying his own village, and is therefore a rogue ninja. Doubt it. Either he's here to betray us, or he's betraying his own village. Or he's simply ignorant. Ignorant then, Temari said confidently. Kiba would have glared if he was able. We'll know as soon as we interrogate him. Temari was not happy with any of this. Whatever his affiliations, she owed this young man too much to let him become a casualty of a war he was probably here to prevent. But Temari also had too much respect for Lady Chiyo to straight up fight her on this. Argue, sure, but not to outright defy. Elders were due a lot of respect in their culture. Meanwhile, Kiba would have demanded to know what really happened to Sakura and Naruto, but he was too paralyzed to talk. Though Temari asked the question for him. I left him with my grandson. Hopefully he dealt with them. He's a Katsuki! He's the enemy! They are after the tailed beasts, and we no longer have one. So they are no longer our problem. And our village's situation is too precarious to challenge an enemy like that needlessly. Now, what of the Kazekage? Temari's expression was answer enough. Chio sighed. I see. I feared as much. Have no fear, child. All hope is not yet lost. Then she goes to do her life transfer technique. At Tamari's prodding, she explained what she's doing, and why. There is nobody we have that can replace Gaara at this juncture. I will do this last act of service to my village. Lady Chio began to weaken as her life drained out of her. Now what do we have here? A voice came from a nearby tree branch. Lady Chio looked up in fear at Naruto's voice. She had her Sage mode active. There would be no fighting her even if Chio were able. The old woman was already too deep into her technique to stop now. Naruto looked at Kiba's injured and frozen form and correctly guessed what had happened. He had another thing to push towards seeing the sand as enemies. Yet seeing Kiba brought up something else too. His last words to her before he left. I don't fully understand what you're thinking, but I know that Gaara is one of the few figures that has been trying to push against what's coming. To get a chance at saving him, that's something I'd gladly lay down my life for. Would he still think the same now after the sand stabbed him in the back? Probably. He was stubborn like that. Naruto still hated Gaara, and now Lady Chio as well for putting Sakura in danger and attacking Kiba. She wanted him to pay. She had the Hokage's mission and all the excuse and opportunity she'd ever need. Everything she'd ever been taught as a ninja told her to complete her mission. Except Jiraiya. Just imagining how disappointed he'd be in her right now was painful. But don't forget that the choice will ultimately fall on you. Neither Jiraiya nor Danzo can make you believe anything. Ultimately, you will have to, and you should, always decide for yourself. Naruto jumped from a tree branch and strolled towards Lady Chio, kunai in hand. Tamari made a move towards her, but was halted as Sakura appeared from behind her and placed a hand on her neck, trapping her in a paralysis genjutsu. Naruto looked at Sakura, hoping she'd find some clue there of what she should do, but there was no help there, just acceptance, and Naruto knew that Sakura would support her whatever she decided. Naruto paused within reach of Lady Chio and looked at her kunai. It was shaking in her hand. Then she looked at Lady Chio. I just want to do the right thing, she said softly. Don't we all? Lady Chio gave her a brittle smile. This world is fucked. I know that. I'm told that Gaara was trying to make things better, but he can't. I probably can't either. Probably not, Lady Chio responded with an air of defeat. Naruto gripped her kunai tighter, and for a few seconds the whole world seemed to hold its breath. I'm so sorry, Ino. Naruto fought and threw her kunai into a nearby tree. It was strange. Making the choice, she somehow didn't doubt that it was the right one. Yet she still felt like screaming. Save him if you can, Naruto said. Lady Chio's shoulders sagged. I've told you that I'm as much to blame for Gaara's crimes as he is. Whatever hatred you feel for him, focus it on me, and let it die with me. For your own sake. Trust me, you don't want to carry that poison with you until the end of your days. I'll try, Naruto said. She walked back to the tree she had jumped from and let herself fall against its trunk and buried her face in her hands, emotionally completely exhausted. Sakura released Tamari and went to try and comfort her friend, but Naruto motioned towards Kiba and Sakura went to check on his injuries instead. Lady Chio collapsed lifeless on the forest floor, and Gaara opened his eyes. Tamari ran over and buried her face into his shoulder, weeping. Witnessing the scene, whatever doubts Naruto still had were erased. At the same time, someone else's doubts were rising. Deep from within his cage, the Kyuubi was also witnessing all of this. This had not gone as expected. Humans were a tribal lot by nature. They would go to great lengths to protect those of their clan, or village, or their friends. To go to such lengths for a stranger was rare, but to extend such to an avowed enemy? The last time he had seen that quality was in that bastard Hashirama Senju. It was a quality that his father had hoped to inspire in humanity, a quality that they so often lacked. And now, the woman who stood between him and freedom was displaying it. For the second time even, as she could have taken everything from him, all in the name of protecting her precious people, of course. Yet she didn't. A woman he had to find a way to kill if he wanted to be free again.
Curse you, fourth Hokage. Why couldn't you have sealed me in anybody else?
And that's the end of part 34. Nighteyes out.